Council, I'll just ask you to share your video when you return, and then I'll know when we can get started. Thank you. Okay, so in the interest of time, I think we'll get started, and I'm sure that Councillor Van Elfen and Councillor Patton will join us later. So we're on to item 3.2, Recreation Department fees and charges. Over to you, Laurie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I apologize, this is probably not as riveting as the Recreation and Health Center subject, and we've got an hour and a half to go through fees and charges. I know Dave is super excited to talk about fees and charges, and hopefully I can keep council engaged through this. So the purpose of today's session on fees and charges is to review the market research and the key findings, to discuss staff's questions and considerations, and for council to provide staff direction on how to proceed with fees and charges updates. The market research was a long and tedious process. It was completed at the end of 2019 and early 2020. Some of the data was relatively straightforward to gather, others was really challenging. And we just need to keep in mind that it's not necessarily comparing apples to apples. So we have to look at the facilities that we're comparing to and keep that in mind. Different amenities are available and different sizes of facilities. The original report was ready for council in March, but because of COVID, we did delay that. And as council recommended, at our October 28th strategic priorities meeting, this report is now coming forward. So why are we doing this? It is best practice for municipalities to periodically review their fees and charges and make adjustments based on the current economic climate. We haven't reviewed or updated fees and charges for recreation since 2012, when admission rates at that time were increased by 18% and rental fees increased by 23% at that time. Prior to 2012, there were fee increases in 2009 and 2006. The 2018 Parks and Recreation Master Plan outlines recommendations around reviewing and updating fees and charges. These recommendations were identified to be completed within the short term of 1 to 3 years. The master plan highlights that this is a very complex exercise to determine the operating costs, set levels of subsidy, and balance between taxes and user fees. And I know our Director of Finance is going to cringe at this comment, but I like to replace the words Parks and Recreation subsidy with Parks and Recreation investment, and determining what that level investment is and what makes sense in our community, that's the hard part. So that is why I'm seeking to gain input from council on where you feel we should continue to invest and what areas and fees you think make sense to apply increases to. And as you can see from this table, there has been very little change in revenues over the last 10 years. You can see on the blue line there, we're hovering around $800,000 of revenues, and that's pretty consistent since 2010. However, our expenses are increasing and steadily year over year. So that investment level has grown by $180,000 since 2010 due to increased rising costs. And I think we can expect that this required investment will continue in future years if we do not look at increasing some of our fees. So how I've structured this presentation, I am going to get into the details and go through admission fees to start, and then looking by facility area, looking at our rental fees. So looking at highlighting for council the key findings through the market research, and then asking you some questions. But before I jump into admission fees and rental fees, I just want to pause for a second and just see if there's any general questions that council has or comments before we get into those details.
I don't see any hands up, Lori.
Okay, great. Everybody's hungry to get to dinner. So looking at admission fees, I think these are probably the easiest that we can compare to with other municipalities. But as I mentioned, you have to keep in mind with the market research, the comparison facilities and the size and the scope of what they're offering in comparison to Summerland. But as we went through the market research, the key findings include that our pool admissions are approximately 30% lower than the region and about 46% lower provincially. Our Summerland Fitness Center, we have one rate for our fitness center, and it's a health club rate, and it includes access to the pool, sauna, hot tub, which not all other municipalities provide, and is not typically provided in private fitness centers. So we don't just have a fee for our fitness room, it's a health club fee. However, we do have just a separate fee for just accessing the pool. We found that our fitness room rates are slightly higher than other municipal facilities that don't include access to aquatic amenities. Summerland's fitness room rates are slightly lower when comparing to municipalities that do include access to aquatic amenities. Our fitness room rates are comparable or slightly higher than private fitness centers, but keep in mind we do offer the aquatic side of things. Our public skating admission rates are consistent with market rates. For all of our admissions, I've found that our 10 ticket passes are underpriced in comparison to other communities. And one thing I was really scratching my head when I went through the admission fees rate structure, and I couldn't find any consistent method on how those admission fees were calculated when they were originally set up. And so I've got a proposed structure to kind of make some sense on how we charge our admission fees that I'll show to you in the next slide here. So a couple of questions to start the discussion. And like I said, I'm going to kind of look at each area, then pause, and then we can have some discussion, because I would really like to get your feedback on what you think I should come back with when I come back with recommendations. So looking at the pool to start, I wanted to throw it out to council to see if you are interested in increasing our pool fees. Would you consider an increase of about 20% to get us closer in line, and maybe a phased approach around that? And I think I'll pause there to see what council has to say.
I have a question on that. Would that include for swim clubs and recope as well, or just for drop-in or passes for the swimming?
So at this point, we're just talking about admission rates. So we're not talking about swim club rental rates. And And we're not talking about Aquafit because Aquafit's a program and we can set the fees for our programs as it depends on market. So this is just admission fee to access the pool, a drop-in fee or a 10 ticket pass or a monthly pass to the pool.
So also not swimming lessons, but simply public swimming and lane swimming.
Exactly, yeah.
Anyone else?
I guess I'd like to see more numbers on that. You know, how many people, how much of our revenue is from public swimming and lane swimming versus swimming lessons and swim club and free cope and stuff like that. Because I mean, if it's just going to make our numbers of people using the pool drop because they think it's now too expensive, it would be a concern I have. But I don't know.
Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, thank you. So first, I agree totally with Lori when she says I like, you know, we should be using the word investment rather than subsidy. And I also totally agree with her when she said that we're not really comparing apples to apples. And in this case, you know, when we look at our current swimming pool and what we're comparing it to, say Penticton's pool, they're not the same thing at all. And so we risk ourselves overpricing. You kind of have to price for the product that you're being given. And if people see that that our prices are in line with Penticton, well, why would anybody come to our pool if they don't, you know, they just see what they're getting for their money. So I just think we should keep that kind of in the back of our minds when setting the prices.
Anybody else? Okay, Lori, carry on, please.
Okay. So what I'm hearing for that is a modest increase. Let's look at how much revenue we're currently bringing in for lane swimming and public swimming, and not looking to get too high, but maybe consider a small increase.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, depending on if it's double digits or not, phasing it in over 2 years, but of course letting the residents know that, you know, they can expect a second one the following year, second increase. I'd be interested in that, depending on what increase we actually end up looking at. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. So moving on to our fitness and health club admissions. I've kind of toyed around whether or not should we just have a fitness room fee, and I'm not recommending that at this time. I think we offer a health club membership and you get a lot of value with that. So at this point, otherwise, if we were just to have a fitness room fee, we might be losing money because we would have to put our prices down lower, and I don't know if we necessarily want to do that. So I'm looking at perhaps considering about a 5% increase on fitness health club admissions, and wanted to see if there was any initial objection by council there.
No objection for me. I like your idea of keeping them combined, because I know of people that will use the fitness room and then go and relax in the hot tub or in the sauna even. So I really like the idea of keeping the two combined.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to public skating. As I mentioned in our key findings, we are seeing that we're on par with other arenas, and that's probably the easiest space, unless you're comparing to a mega arena. Most community arenas, and that's what I tried to compare to, was community arenas. Our public skating rates are the same, so I was looking at just a 25-cent increase. So if it was $2.50, it would go to $2.75. But essentially keeping them pretty much the same, unless otherwise directed by council.
If I may, Lori, I wonder if we could consider a season pass for public skating, and even for drop in noon hour hockey as well. I think that would be quite popular, and it would help. Something people would buy at the beginning of the year, and then it's something they wouldn't have to fish for their quarters for when they come to every time they come. And I think it would get more people out to public skating if they knew they could just they want to get their money's worth from their pass.
Great idea. Definitely something I can put some numbers together for consideration for sure. Thank you.
I like that idea as well. Dave, I just have one question. What would be the impact on like cash flow? Would there be an impact at all?
Well, I guess from a cash flow perspective, if depending on how many people purchased annual tickets, in some instances, if it's like a gym membership, sometimes someone will buy it and not go at all, and sometimes someone will buy it and totally use it. So there's probably a break-even point at some point in time there. Overall, from a cash flow perspective, when we look at the cash that will be coming in on those streams, they would be pretty minimal in the grand scheme of things anyway. So I wouldn't foresee any issues with cash flow there.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, and then moving on to a rate structure for admission fees, keeping in mind this is the drop-in fees, the 10 ticket passes, monthly passes. So what I'm proposing is to come back with council when I come back with the recommended fees, is to have a 10 ticket pass, which is essentially a nine times a single drop-in rate. So if you buy a 10 ticket pass, you get one for free. And a 1 month pass would be 10 times the single drop-in rate. So if you come to the fitness room more than 10 times in a month, it makes financial sense for you to buy a monthly pass. Then having a 3 month pass, which is at 85% if you were to buy 3 1 month passes. And having a 6 month pass would be 70% of what it would cost to have 6 months at 1 month rate. And a 1 year pass would be 65% subsidy or reduction. So that would be consistent between whether you're buying a pool pass or a fitness room pass. But there is a system on how that's calculated. And right now there isn't. So I'm familiar with this in other communities and just wanted to put it forward to council. And if you're okay with that, I'll come back with what that would look like at the next meeting.
Just a question, Lori. We'll use the last one, 1 year pass, 12 by 1 month times 65%. So they're essentially saving 35% if they bought. Yes, thank you. I like this idea.
I know right now there's some sort of discount. Is this simply giving it a formula, or is it changing it dramatically from what it currently is?
It's not changing dramatically, but it's keeping it consistent. So I went back and looked at what it was, and it was kind of close, but not on, a 3 month pass for a youth isn't the same formula for a 3 month pass for an adult, which is different than a senior. They're close, but it's just creating consistency across the board.
Good idea. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay.
Okay, so moving on to rental rates, and I'm just going to start with arena rental rates. And the key findings around that is that our youth rental rates are approximately 30% lower than the region and provincially. Our youth non-prime rate is significantly lower than the region and provincially. Summerland's adult ice rates are 11% lower than the region and 18% lower provincially. Our summer youth ice rates are comparable to market. Our adult summer rates are significantly lower than the region and provincially. Our dry floor hourly rates are significantly lower than regional and provincial, except for the youth game rate. Our dry floor day rates seem to be in line with market. However, there were only a few comparators to look at. And our junior B ice rental rates for games are 6% lower than comparable communities and 18% lower for practices. So my questions for you, if you are willing to consider some rental rates to become closer to the market. And again, if it is a bit of a jump, a phased in approach. And, you know, is there a maximum increase in 1 year that you would be comfortable with, whether it's a 5% or a 10%? And Mayor Boot, you mentioned double digits might be the trigger. If we're going to go to double digits, maybe look at a phased approach. Wanted to see your thoughts around the lower than average youth rates for facilities such as minor hockey. Do we want to kind of get those up to market rate? Our junior B rates, I don't think they're on your spreadsheet, but a junior B rate for a practice is $74 and $101 for a game per hour. We just wanted to see where you sat with the arena.
Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, like the pool, I think we're not really comparing apples to apples when we're looking at Penticton, because there's such a different model, you know, with the private sector involvement and everything like that. And certainly when Penticton built its new arenas, you know, I had a son in hockey, minor hockey at the time, and you know, we heard it from the Penticton parents how expensive minor hockey had become, and we were really lucky here in Summerland that parents can afford to put their kids in hockey, and I think we need to keep that in consideration. This is where the investment, it's an investment, not a subsidy thing, that we got to keep. We have to make it affordable for families to have their youth participating in sports. So I'd really, you know, I think when we're looking at comparisons for arenas, Oliver and Osoyoos are probably better places to look at than Penticton. Thank you.
Councillor Van Elfen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As per the junior B hockey rates, it sounds like we're pretty comparable to other communities. You know, it is, I don't know how to say this, I guess. It is a form of entertainment in our town that we desperately need things for kids or young, you know, families to go and watch. Unfortunately, this year that's not going to happen, but you know, I don't think the rates are that far off other communities. So I would tend to want to just leave them alone and hopefully encourage more people to go and spectate.
Councillor Trainer?
Lori, do you know what a fee increase would actually look like for individuals? Like, so for a family that has their son or daughter in hockey, like if we did like a 5% increase or something like that, like what does that actually, I don't know if you can answer that question, but what would that look like in terms of dollars per person per season, I guess? Do you have an approximate number?
I could only assume if our rates went up 5%, perhaps they may go up by 5% to the sport organizations, but it's really, they set their fees. So I don't know their business model. I don't know how they calculate what fees they charge currently. But obviously if we increase our arena rates, that goes into their formula.
Okay. Okay, well, I agree with the other two counselors, what they've said so far. But I mean, if we could maybe somehow find a balance, I'm trying to keep the fees low still, but doing, you know, a minimal increase. I think that a minimal increase is reasonable, especially if we haven't had an increase. I think you said since 2012. The cost of running these facilities does go up. So I think that it's to be expected that there would be a little bit of an increase. And I think that that would be reasonable. What that number is or percentages exactly, I don't know, but I think, you know, a small increase is reasonable.
Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with Councillor Trainer. My only concern would be, I don't have a problem with a small increase, but maybe Lori is something you could possibly look into. Like if there was a 5% increase, that does Minor Hockey Association hammer the parents for a 10% increase? You know what I mean? Like as long as it's apples to apples, you know, if we're going to raise the fees, then as long as minor hockey's not marking that up, so to speak, to the families. Is that something you could find out, Lori?
I can reach out to the various groups and let them know we are considering a minimal increase and get some feedback from them in advance of coming back to you of how that would impact the end user and get some feedback. They probably can't give me an exact answer, but they could give me some information around that, including the Junior B Club.
Councillor Barkwell.
Yeah, to Councillor Van Elfen's point, the fees for ice rental would obviously only be a proportion of the total cost of minor hockey. Even if they pass the full, I mean, I can't see them doing anything less than passing on the full cost of a ice increase, but maybe the ice is only 50% or 70% of their budget, so they would only need to pass on 70% of 5%. We don't, what they do and what they charge and the factors for them is completely nothing to do with us. I can't be concerned about what they do when we set our rates. Our considerations are simply our considerations. That being said, 8 years without an increase, and inflation's being 2% a year, 16% increase wouldn't be out of line. But overlapping or overriding all of that is some sort of, I don't know what you'd call it, rebalancing you spoke about, bringing in some rationalization to the prices, fees and charges, and making them some would maybe need an increase and some less, a smaller increase. So whatever we do have to remember that our costs have gone up with inflation, and and at the very least we should pass on the inflationary increases. And we're lucky that we have a pool built an arena built quite a few years ago, and we don't need to gouge people, but we do need to keep covering our expenses and stay proportional. So an inflationary increase somewhere in there, and what you've thrown out there is quite reasonable. I just lean a little bit towards at least recovering inflation. Thanks. My 2 bits worth, I don't know what number will fall out of this whole thing.
And I don't know if Dave can help me with this, but if we are to look at inflationary costs over 10 years, I'm anticipating that would be a significant increase versus a minor increase. Dave, do you have a comment on that?
Well, as Councillor Barkwell noted, yeah, if we look at even 2% over the last 8 years, we're looking at a 16% potential increase, which I think in any of those cost categories would classify that as fairly a substantial increase. So if council's planning on going down that road, and I'm not saying that you are, but at that point in time, it would probably be beneficial to implement something like that over a 2 or 3 year phased approach as opposed to a one-time hit.
Okay, I don't see any more. Oh, Councillor Carlson.
I just want to pitch in just briefly. I think that this conversation, I know that it hasn't come forward because of COVID, but I think that because of COVID, it's a lot harder to have this conversation right now. People's costs of living are already up, and people don't have extra money, and so we want to continue to encourage them to use the facilities in their community on one hand, but we also know that people are staying home and they have to use the facilities in their community. So it's a bit of a toss-up and a challenge. But what I really don't want is for us to increase fees and then people not to be coming to use those facilities because there's a barrier. So if there's a way that we can get creative to avoid that, I would wholeheartedly support.
Yeah, I think Councillor Carlson has raised a really good point. One of the things that we have talked about all through COVID is how the district had made the decision to keep as many of our recreational trails and our facilities open as long as possible. You know, they reopened now. And I think that whatever we can do to minimize the financial impact, especially on households, so people that have children, school-age children, or others that are taking part in activities of a recreational nature. I think that maybe, well, I certainly see your point, Lori, in that it's been almost 9 years since there's been any change, and you know the cost of living is going up everywhere on everything. But at the same time, if we can keep that in mind and minimize this, I think that that's something that I would like to see. Just consideration for that, anyways. Thanks.
We want to jump to the pool next? Okay. Okay, so keeping in mind, this is rental fees for the pool. So this is for when swim club rents lanes, and when if that, we're not doing really any rentals because of COVID right now, but we would typically rent our pool out for birthday parties or rent it out for commercial bookings or other activities where somebody wants exclusive use of the pool. So our, if we're looking at the full pool, so renting the entire facility, we're essentially on par regionally and provincially. Our lane rates, including swim club rates, are lower than the region and provincially. So they would book 1 lane, 4 lanes, 6 lanes as part of their swim club. Typically, right now, we're looking at six lanes of rentals. And then we have an extra guard rate. So when we have a pool rental or a school that's coming in and we need to bring on extra lifeguards to assist with that rental, we do a pass on the lifeguard rate, which is not just what we pay them an hour, but we actually labor load that in and then have a 15% admin fee on top of that, which is higher than what other communities are charging. So the questions are the same as the arena. Do we want to consider getting our pool rental fees closer to the market? And do we want to continue with the lower than average youth rates, for example, for the swim club? So looking at the pool, are there any differences from council's mind from the arena to the pool based on what you've heard of the key findings?
See Councillor Holmes shaking his head. Councillor Carlson.
It's just sort of connected to the other question when we first started talking about pool rates. I mean, there's lots of questions here and maybe we should increase, but how much does it cost to rent a lane if you're swimming for the Master Swim Club? I've heard it's $7 a lane for the whole hour or whatever that they have. I don't know if that's true. So I'm just wondering, these are all really valid questions and they're really important, but we're having a conversation about fees and charges without any numbers attached to it. And I'm just struggling with that a little bit.
With the council report, it did have all the attachments of the fees.
Okay,
And
I will try and look at that as the same time. Thanks.
it's a lot of data, so I apologize for that, but there are, the swim club rate is $7 per lane for the swim club, whether it's the adult or the youth. Swim
Pretty
club.
good deal, but I don't know what.
And so in that spreadsheet, it'll show you what other communities are charging per lane.
Okay. I know that for me to swim masters, it costs $10 per session, give or take. So, I mean, that's pretty cheap. But I don't know what their numbers would look like, right? And I don't know what the Orca numbers would look like. So that makes it hard for me to judge it.
So what I'm hearing is that it's important to council that I reach out and have some discussions with these user groups to find out what the impacts would be if we are to increase fees.
Does anyone else on council feel that way? I mean, I don't want Lori to go and do a whole bunch of work just because I spoke up.
Councillor Barkwell, you had your hand up a bit ago, and then Councillor Trainer.
Just want to point out that it may be fine to keep the rates low and not even keep up with inflation, but you're changing the balance then, because whatever you don't charge in user fees, the balance of the taxpayers of Summerland have to pay. So one way or the other, it has to be paid for. To Councillor Carlson's question there, I think that we know what every group would say is that they would argue that rates should stay free for that, or low as possible. So there's a table here. It has a heck of a lot of data. We can decide just how comparable certain things are. Obviously, Penticton, you take that into consideration. Penticton pool is new and beautiful and has other things, but we have our costs. And so, what's your philosophy? User pay, or the taxpayer pay, or what's the balance in between? And it seems like on some things, it's a little bit more user pay, and on other things, it's a little bit less user pay. So I don't know. There's no right answer.
I have a thought. The last conversation that we had was about this facility that's going to cost us a whole lot of money, and that's going to be paid for by the taxpayers. I think it's going to see a huge increase in users as well. So we're going to be, there'll be a great benefit there. I'm just wondering if we do decide to move this, do some fees and charges changes, is there a way that we can connect it to the fact that we'd like to build a new pool into a reserve fund or something like that? Or is that too complicated? Maybe that's a question for David.
Well, Councillor Carlson, there's always a way. I think in that instance, if we're trying to earmark specific increases, so i.e. if we increased, the swim club by $3, there would be a lot of there'd be a lot of administration behind that, a lot of calculations. I think if council was planning on looking at something like that, i.e. earmarking certain dollars, I think the easiest and maybe the best way to do it would be to look at the figures at the beginning of the year and come up with a figure that council would be comfortable with transferring into a reserve account, specifically for, building this aquatic / health center in the future, and going about it that way, as opposed to trying to say, okay, of the $2.50 increase in this rate, 50 cents is going to go into, like, that would be extremely difficult to try to administer.
Sure. I'm just putting it out there. If we're going to increase fees, maybe we need to have a story that goes with it. I don't know.
Yeah, that's messaging.
Yeah, of course. But that's
Yeah.
what we need to do. If we're going to start making a story here, then we need to message it, and having this conversation, that might be the best way for people to, or for me to stomach increasing fees at all. So that's just my perspective though.
If I can speak to that, Madam Mayor.
Yes, please.
I guess part of the messaging or part of the story is that, as Lori mentioned earlier, we haven't raised rates here in 8 to 12 years. So it's definitely we're getting to a point where our costs are continuously increasing, and it's time that this gets looked at.
Councillor Trainer?
I just have a quick comment, and I kind of wanted to know what the other councillors think. I wonder if we would have a different approach to raising the fees if we weren't doing it during this COVID time. Like, I feel like we're all being conservative, which because of what's going on, and we don't want to raise fees too much, given that, you know, recreation is so important during this time. So I'm kind of trying to look at this like, you know, there's the COVID context, and then there's the post-COVID context. And then, you know, we also have a new pool hopefully coming on. So I'm trying to juggle all these things in my head, but then I'm also trying to keep it simple and just say, you know what, we haven't raised fees or touched them for 8 years. And that in itself warrants, I think, some kind of increase. So I just kind of wanted to know how others are wrapping this discussion around in their head, basically in terms of COVID and how that might be affecting our decision today.
Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, certainly COVID makes it more difficult. I think, as Councillor Carlson was saying, it certainly makes this conversation a lot more difficult than it would have been a year ago. So that's why I kind of agree with I believe what Councillor Carlson had said, that we need to increase it, but we need to increase all our rates and fees, but maybe we can't, you know, increase it the full amount of inflation over the past 10 years because of COVID, and we need to keep that in mind. So it's about finding that balance.
Councillor Barkwell? Looks like your hand's coming out of the lake.
Yeah, I know. This talk's kind of funny, doesn't it? Well, since you asked, I think I don't worry about the COVID impact here on this particular item much at all, because I think that when it comes right down to it, the change is rather inconsequential for any particular transaction. And if you can take it from the other end, because the money that we don't charge and make up in fees and charges is going to be paid by a COVID impacted taxpayer rather than a COVID impacted user. So one way or the other, whoever's paying the piper here is being affected by COVID. Which one?
I think that's the part of the challenge though, is, and what I'm saying is, we want all of our taxpayers to be users, right? Like, I go to the pool all the time, but I don't know if you go to the pool all the time, but you could just as easily as I could if it was something that, because it's a public facility that's offered. So I just, I don't know. It's if it was really expensive, I wouldn't go though, because I would go do something else. Not that this is making it really expensive. It's just part of the philosophy, I suppose.
Anybody else would like to weigh in on Councillor Trainer's question of us? I think I've already said what I felt about that. Councillor Van Elfen, did you want to add anything to this?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could we consider half now and half next year that phased in approach, look, like, taking into the consideration the COVID impact, and then next year, do half now and then giving the messaging that we will be increasing, 50% again next year type idea? Is that something there's an appetite for here within council?
So the increase in 2021 and then 2022 with the message that, yes, it'll be increased over 2 years. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that.
If you're taking a poll, I agree. If the rate increase might be a bit substantial for some items, being that it's gone so long, so a phased-in approach is quite reasonable in my mind.
Maybe I should be a little bit clearer. For me personally, I'm not suggesting that we're looking at 16%. Although that does, I had said before, if we're looking at double digits, then I would like to see it over a couple of years. I'm not necessarily suggesting that I'm wholeheartedly in agreement with 2% per year over the last 8, but it's just my opinion. You didn't have a question, Councillor Traynor? Or you did?
Oh, no, sorry. I was just going to say thank you for those that answered. I just kind of wanted to throw that out there and see what others thought. Are we going to be voting on anything specifically, or just giving Lori guidance?
At this point, I was looking for some guidance before I came back with some fees to put in front of you.
Well, I would be in favor of a phased approach then, because I think considering that we haven't done anything for 8 years, I think it's definitely reasonable that there's some kind of increase, but also given that we're in COVID right now, something that's maybe scaled back a little bit and implemented over a couple of years.
Councillor Barkwell?
Yeah, what Lori's presented is a heck of a lot of information, and I would suggest that certainly there's some items where a 16% increase over 2 years would be too much.
Well, no, but if you look at the commercial and private and all of that, it's quite a bit more. And
I haven't finished. Who's speaking?
You are Councillor Barkwell.
Okay, I wasn't sure. So yeah, some items there might be no increase, and others maybe we might be looking at a larger increase. So I'm throwing out concepts, not numbers.
Councillor Carlson?
That's okay, I'm good.
Okay. Just one last thing that I'd like to add. Where we're able to, can we, and I don't know if we can do this. Maybe we can, maybe we can't. Lori, you can answer this. Where we're able to, can we try not to put too much of an increase on any youth things? Because for me, the youth things kind of tie into family things. And if you, for example, if you have a child that's in swim club or that's taking swimming lessons or something like that, there may be another child, or there may be another 2 children, and there might be mom and dad. And I'm just thinking that if we can minimize the impacts of youth rates, then we can also minimize the impacts of an overall family household of 4 or 5. Just a thought. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Then that kind of goes back to like even with hockey and minor hockey, if we raise the rates, we don't know what minor hockey is going to pass on to the families of the children. Same as swim club. We could raise the rates to swim club, and then how do they pass that on to the families and how much? So, that's where we kind of lose control, I believe, when the club goes ahead and raises it whatever they want, I suppose. I can't see them, not passing on the increase, but, are they marking that up or what have you? And I guess we have no control over that.
I wasn't suggesting no increase at all. I was just asking if we could have some consideration for minimal increases. And I think, Lori, you were going to see if you could get some input from the hockey clubs, right? Yes, good.
I can do that. I can.
So then that will help us in the information that we get back.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Matt?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Will Lori, will you also be talking to like Orca Swim Club? Thank you.
I'll look at all the youth organizations that rent from us and get some feedback from them.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lori. So I guess we're on to the sports fields and things. Thank you.
Okay, yes. So looking at our outdoor spaces, so parks, sports fields, and court rentals. Our youth bookings for ball diamonds, soccer fields for minor sport are free. I've looked back in the fees and charges schedule, and I can see that there was a team fee for youth sport in there, but talking to our clerk who has booked these fields for many, many years, there's never been a charge to youth sport groups for soccer fields and ball diamonds. So I wanted council to be aware of that, and we'll talk about this in the next slide, but whether or not we want to continue with that. Our adult slow pitch leagues, they pay a team rate. So if you play adult slow pitch and you're the league organizer provides a per team amount to the district for the use of the fields. That was a different model that I'm familiar with. Typically, what we've done in the past in other communities is it's an hourly field booking. So if you use, depending on how many fields you use and how long you use them, there's an hourly booking rate. But that's something that Summerland set up many, many years ago. And so if you have 10 teams, you pay that 10 times the team rate to the district. Summerland's hourly rate, $15 per hour for adult practices on sports fields, for some reason are not included in the fees and charges bylaw. So that's not a league. That's if somebody comes and they just want to have a practice. They're not part of the league. They're not playing games. They just want to have an extra practice and they want to book the field. It's being charged out at $15 an hour, but it's not in the fees and charges bylaw. Summerland doesn't charge for sport field lights. So in some communities, when we did the market analysis, if you use the evening field at night and then you needed the lights, you paid an extra fee. Some communities roll that fee into their, so everybody pays for the sports lights and it's just wrapped into the hourly rate. Summerland does not charge for any community park bookings. So that's been a long-standing thing in this community, that if you are Action Fest, or if you are running a triathlon, or you're doing any activity in a park, even if you're doing a wedding, there is no charge to book our community parks. And just another note that we found that Williams Lake also does not charge for outdoor fields, parks, or courts. So my questions to council, I'll start maybe just with the first one. Do we want to continue to have no charge for sport field bookings for youth? Or do we want to incorporate in a small fee as the majority of other communities do?
Councillor Holmes?
Thank you. Yeah, well, this isn't specifically to the first question, but I guess to all of them, all the questions here in general. I think if there's no charge, then there's no expectation on what the group is getting in terms of the quality of what they're renting, right? They can't make any demands on what you're providing. You get what's there. Once you start charging for something that hasn't been charged for before, then you're going to have a certain expectation of that what they're booking has to be of a certain quality for the purposes that they're using it for. And I think we can ensure that quality. For certainly with sport fields, I would assume, but I think we're and then we could charge whatever is on par with the region. But where we're not able to ensure that quality, then I think it's going to be difficult to start levying charges, if that makes sense.
Councillor Van Elfen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's definitely something I'd like to see some more investigation done on. We charge for ice time, we charge for the aquatic center for youth, we charge for everything else. I think we should, like organized soccer, organized baseball, what have you, that, there's a fee, and then the other thing too, on the sports field or the parks, bookings and what have you, when you look at something like, Action Fest, and I know there's a million different ways to look at it, and I know it brings a ton of people into the community, and there's people spending money, and that's a wonderful thing. But if you look at our labor costs as a district in garbage collection and setting up and tearing down and all those types of things, we don't charge anything for it. We should be getting some type of fee for those facilities, our parks and what have you. But it's just, I'm just talking out loud. I mean, I figure, if we're charging at the pool and charging at the arena, here's an area where we might be able to offset some of our costs. Like to hear what everybody else says. Thank you.
Councillor Barkwell and then Councillor Traynor.
Yeah, I can distinguish between, say, a sports field and the arena or the pool, because they're so expensive to build and expensive to maintain, whereas the sports fields are relatively cheap. And the other thing I throw out there, and maybe Dave can comment on this, is that sometimes the administration of a small fee is hardly worth the money you collect. And I don't want to lose what we would otherwise be gaining just because it costs, chasing down people's checks bounce, processing things, and keeping track of fees and collections and payments and stuff. So if it's a small fee, I'd rather just not have any fee. If it's going to be something larger, then I'd consider it.
Dave?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, Councillor Barkwell, there definitely are times when the administration of collecting small fees really doesn't make sense to actually charge for those fees. I think in these instances, when you're looking at specific youth groups or specific groups as a whole, you're looking at an association that would be making a payment as opposed to Joe or Judy coming in and wanting to rent the field for a day. So I think there's a bit of a distinction there. But yes, I would agree that in some instances, having those minimal fees and trying to chase people to pay those fees can be quite cumbersome. And I'm just trying to pull up, I'm not sure if I have it here. Dale Meadows. I'm just trying to see what, so Dale Meadows, our budget for Dale Meadows is about $160,000 a year to operate that. So it's not a nominal fee to be operating that park. So I just wanted to throw that out as well. Thank you.
And for admin fees for our park, we still need to book our park. So we still need to work with the organizations. We need to book their times. We need to get them to have insurance. We need to get them to sign a rental contract, even if it's no cost. So to add a fee on as far as an admin fee would not be substantial into comparison what we're doing already.
Councillor Trainer?
I just have a comment on charging for commercial and wedding purposes. Lori, we don't charge anything for either one of those right now. Is that correct?
We don't charge a park booking, but if they are wanting to book the park, they need insurance. And so we do just a cost recovery of the insurance of the park, which they pay.
Okay, I don't know what the rest of council thinks, but I think that charging a fee for commercial bookings or weddings, I don't know as well if filming would fall under commercial, but I think that we should be doing that. You know, it kind of is a way of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, I don't know, showing respect to the park as well. I mean, if you just get it for free, you know, I don't really think that's right. I mean, especially commercial, like you're making money off of something. Weddings, you know, weddings cost money. And so I think that there should be some kind of fee for those two things for sure. I'm not sure about the sports yet. I'm just still listening to the discussions on that, but I don't know what other people think about, again, commercial and weddings.
Well, the wedding part of it is pretty straightforward. Lori, how would you determine if it's a commercial thing? Would it be if it's non-recreational? I can't really think of an example. I guess maybe a market or something like that, or what would be a commercial example?
So I think we could, if we wanted to look at private bookings, like a wedding or say a reunion would kind of be similar. So anything that's a private booking that's not a public event could be categorized, and we could put some costs for council's consideration together around that. For commercial, that would be any group that, like a business group that's going to be there. So an example could be film. So if a film booking to use our park, it could, because they're making money off of using it. If it was a triathlon that's not a nonprofit organization, so if it's a triathlon group that is making money off of hosting that activity, so it's really, if it's a farmer's market, if somebody is actually profiting by using it, you know, if it's a single use. So that would be like a single use booking. If it was something that somebody wanted to use the park to rent kayaks or to have a business in our park, that would become something completely different, and we would have to come to council and get a lease approval around that, and they would have to pay market rate. So what we're talking about is just you know, if you're booking the park for a certain activity. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. So, council, what are your thoughts on commercial and park reunion kind of bookings and applying a fee for those? Councillor Van Elfen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that we should investigate looking into charging some type of rate for that. A quick question through to Lori, if I may. The Action Fest, do they charge, they charge their ball teams to come and play in a tournament? Do we charge Action Fest for the diamond rentals?
So we do charge, the ball tournament gets charged for their use of the park. The Memorial Park booking for when they do their activities in Memorial Park is free.
Thank you.
So what I'm hearing and so far is come back with some options around commercial park bookings and private bookings for your consideration. I can come back with youth sport bookings, a nominal fee. Again, you don't, this is just for consideration, but I can come back with what that would look like, and you can at that time determine, no, we don't want to charge anything for youth sport, or this is what nominal would look like, and you could consider that. What I haven't heard yet is community parks. So looking at our community events, do we want to continue to those organizations that are using our parks for a community event? Do we want to continue to have those at no cost, or do you want me to come back with some fees for consideration around that?
Okay, Councillor Barkwell had his hand up, and then Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, my comment wasn't specifically to Lori's question. I was just thinking that when she does come back, how does council feel like maybe we deal with each of these things at a series of subsequent meetings, little bite-sized portions. Today we deal with swim club. The next two weeks later we deal with the our arena. Not some sort of long session. Just work out one thing at a time when we come back to making a decision and have a recommendations. Does anybody else sort of feel that would be a good way to go, or do you want to do it all at once?
I'll go to Councillor Holmes and Councillor Traynor first, and then we'll give us a couple of minutes to think on that.
Well, just to Councillor Barkwell's point, I think if we establish certain principles, what our principles are, then we, I think we can do them all at once because we just follow our principles. I think for community parks, to Lori's question, I think if it's a non-profit, if it's an event, I think I would rather see it continue non-charged, because these are the sort of events that build community and give our community vibrancy. So if it's commercial, for sure they should be charged. If it's non-profit, then I'm continuing the way it is. I'm happy continuing the way it is.
I think I'm next. I agree with what Councillor Holmes just said when it comes to nonprofit and commercial bookings. And what was my other point? Oh yeah, with regards to what Councillor Barkwell said, I would rather do all the fees at once, but I would leave that to Lori to decide what's easiest for staff, whether she would rather do it over time period or get them all done at once.
Councillor Carlson and then Van Elfen.
Just want to let you know that I agree with Councillor Holmes in what he has just said.
Councillor Van Elfen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree. Once Lori gets it all figured out, she'll have it so fine-tuned, it'll be just quick and easy, I'm sure. And I'd rather get it dealt with all at once. Just another quick question, if I may, through to Lori. So let's say Festival of Lights, and you're a vendor and you're set up in the park. Do you pay rental for that as a vendor?
No, Action Fest or all the community events right now that come into town and book our parks for a public event. I know that they do collect fees, but there's nothing passed on to the district. It's a free booking.
Thank you.
Keeping in mind that those are nonprofit organizations typically that are running them.
Right. Lori, when you do bring back this and when it's time for council to make some decisions, and maybe this is a question actually for Karen. It will be the decision on the fees and charges for recreation will be a decision that we have in a regular council meeting, right? Okay, good.
That's correct.
Yeah, just to keep it, transparent as possible. Thanks. Okay. So Lori, do you have what you need from us in terms of the park considerations?
Just flagging that right now we don't charge for tennis or pickleball tournaments. So in some communities, if you're booking exclusive use of tennis courts or pickleball courts, there can be a fee associated with that. So that would be one area. Also, I'm looking to come back to council with a per field per hour rate for adult sports field bookings for your consideration, unless you have any understanding or reasoning why these league team rates are in place. But I would like to simplify it so that teams are actually paying for what they use versus how many teams they have, just for the sake of consistency. And also looking, if pickleball didn't happen, pickleball club did not book their pickleball courts in 2020 because of COVID. I anticipate that they will be looking to book the courts in 2021. So I don't think we're going to have any decisions in place by the time they start up, and potentially in April, maybe even earlier. So proposing that we just have a similar lease rate for their use of $300 plus tax, and then looking at a per member rate, which is consistent with other communities in the future. So that means if they have 80 members of the club and we say we're looking to charge a $10 per member rate for the use of the pickleball courts for their exclusive use, then we would be getting $800 versus $300. So it depends on the size of their club on what they would pay. So that's what I'm proposing around that. So yeah, back to council. Any charge for tournaments?
Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, I guess I go back to again, then if you're going to start charging, there's going to be some expectation on what they get for their money. So, if you charge for a tournament and the net straps are all broken, there's water bubbling up through the courts because of the engineering issues on the courts and sort of stuff. How are you going to deal with all that? And that would be my question for tournaments. What we're talking about isn't, I don't think, the same quality as say our playing fields. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration. And also, if I could just say, I know Penticton has this non-residence fee for some of its sport fields and tennis courts and whatnot. And when I was running for many years here in Summerland, I ran this a beginner tennis tournament for kids. So it's like their first introduction to competition. And I did it many years here in Summerland. And one year, Tennis BC asked me if I could do one in Penticton because nobody was doing any there for the kids in Penticton. And they charged me this non-residence fee because I didn't live in Penticton, even though the event was for Penticton kids. And it was ridiculous, the price, and because I was non-resident, and had I been a resident in Penticton, it would have been okay. It would have been, I could have dealt with it, but you're just discouraged. And then so I just did it the once and said because I couldn't pass those kind of fees on to those kids. So it's I never did it again in Penticton. So I think, we need to keep things, again, understand what it is we're trying to achieve. We want to make sure people are actually using these facilities and not pricing them out.
Any other thoughts, Council? Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, I tend to agree with Councillor Holmes with what the quality we have today, maybe in the future, if we had 3 brand new tennis courts or something and we had tournaments, then we could possibly reconsider this. But at this point in time, I have to agree. I just think it, like you say, water bubbling up or, other issues just makes the game that much more challenging, doesn't it? You should charge extra for that. Just kidding.
Okay, thank you. That's
Okay.
helpful. Okay, going on to theater rentals. So we did some comparisons. It is in the data spreadsheets that I had circulated with other theaters, and in the data sheets it shows the number of seats in each of those other facilities that we were comparing to. And we are seeing that our rates in Summerland are significantly lower, including our technician rate is lower than comparison theaters. And we don't have a cost recovery fee for piano tuning, so we lose money every time we book the piano. So throwing it back to council, if I know there was a little bit of discussion on October 28th about wanting to fill it versus increasing fees, but just want to bring the discussion back around the theater on what we should be charging. Or just a modest increase.
Councillor Holmes, and then I'll go.
Yeah, this is a really difficult one because it's kind of a chicken and egg situation where the theater is really underused, and one of the reasons it's underused is because of the cost. But then, so that because it's underused, it probably costs even more than it probably should be to operate, and so you need to increase your costs to cover them. So I don't really know where to go on this myself. Certainly we should recover the cost of tuning a piano, but for the overall rentals, yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah, I agree. This is a tough one with the theater rentals because we're always hearing that the costs seem to be so high. And I don't know, I mean, clearly in comparison, they're not. But then again, this year, due to COVID, even when groups were able to use the theater, it was at what, 1/3, 1/2 capacity. So that really impacts theater or ticket sales. So I don't know what to do on this one. Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, it's almost like we need some sort of plan to what to do about the theater and how we can, make it more increased usage of the theater and make it more popular. And I think that this could be a separate discussion altogether and engage with the community a bit more. I don't know, but we need to figure out what we want to, what are we going to do?
It's definitely something that I thought of when I first started here, is creating a theater optimization plan, which would take some time and effort and engagement and putting a few heads together on how to get more bums in seats and what is the price point and can you assist with ticket sales? And there's a lot you can do around a theater to optimize it. And if that's a priority down the road, I think that's a good idea. I think we've got a lot of priorities happening right now, but it is on my list of theater optimization plan to happen. And maybe for now, we just look at a cost of living small increase for now, and that goes on the list of things to research in the future.
Councillor Trainer?
Yeah, I agree with what Laurie said. I think perhaps a small, I think she called it cost of living increase would be okay. The theater is such a neat theater. It's too bad that it's not used more, but I think that, like Laurie said, a marketing plan or some kind of vision for it might help get more groups in there. I think it can go on hold for now, though, in terms of that plan, because I don't know what COVID's going to do with this. And, I think about that every time I go by the SOEC, like, when are we going to get to have concerts in there again? And I think theaters and concert places are kind of one of the last places that they're going to allow groups to congregate. So I think it's okay if we put this one on hold and like I said, maybe do just a little increase now because we're doing all the others.
Okay, great.
Councillor Van Elfen has something to add.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, I have to agree with Councillor Trainer. A modest increase at this point in time, and then we need to do a long-term, study when the time permits. And I would hope that we would engage the arts and cultural community at that time and get their thoughts and input. Maybe they've got some really good ideas that maybe we can get more bums in the seat, so to speak. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so you have what you need, I think, here, Laurie.
Okay, moving on to banquet rooms and meeting rooms. And this was by far the hardest area to look at what we charge and how we compare to other communities. As you can imagine, banquet rooms and meeting rooms come in all different sizes and amenities that come with them. So I'm just suggesting just a small cost of living increase for this and looking at streamlining our categories. I couldn't believe how many categories there are based on the size of how many people are coming into the meeting room. And so I'd like to come back with some suggestions around streamlining the categories and just looking at a cost of living increase, unless council has any other thoughts.
Councillor Van Elfen?
Sounds good to me. Thank you.
Two. Okay, I guess we're going that one.
Okay, and rodeo grounds, also a very difficult one to compare and to find other rodeo grounds across the province that have similar amenities, like not possible, but we did find some rodeo grounds and looked at the prices. And I would like to defer this to when we do our master plan for the rodeo grounds and to include that in the scope of work to look at the fees and charges around that. And I think we're reasonable. We're not completely out of the ballpark for our fees. So looking at just a small cost of living increase for this area.
Councillor Van Elfen?
Agreed.
I'm getting you guys tired now. This is easier.
No. I agree with, we gotta get to that master plan eventually, but for now, let's do the modest increase. Can't justify a large increase if we haven't done, we don't even have a plan.
I'm with Councillor Van Elfen. I just have a question. What about the camping rates? You say they should be increased significantly. Is that outside of the small cost of living increase?
We'll look at that. Maybe we'll come back with a couple of options as consideration, but that's definitely one area where we were potentially out of line. So we'll come back with something for you to think about.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks.
Okay, how are we doing for time? I've got 1, 2, 4 more slides to go through. Really other fees that we haven't considered yet, future fees to consider, and then looking at proposed timelines. Are we okay for time?
We have 4 minutes for 4 slides, including feedback. So we'll see how we can manage.
Okay, I will try to be quick here. So this is other fees that we don't currently have in place. We've talked about film production fees at previous meetings. So we have a couple of options here. We can look at doing some research of what other communities are charging and come back with some proposal for council. Also, Councillor Holmes came up with potential opportunity to work with the region on a regional schedule. I don't have a contact around that, but I'd be happy to participate if there's something already on the go, or if there's a regional, through the regional district, if something's happening there, I could tie into that. Yeah. Councillor Holmes, do you have any update on?
I can probably find out through the RDS, or else you could call John Summerland, who's the chair or the executive director of the Okanagan Film Commission. I can provide you his details, and depending on how busy he is with filming right now, he could probably talk to you. He could talk your ear off about the whole idea of rate structures for filming, and the idea of having one for the whole region, or just for the community. So he'd be the best person to talk to.
So I do have John Summerland's contact information. I'm attending an Okanagan Region Film Commission meeting on December 4th, and he is presenting to the entire Okanagan on fee permitting. So what to consider, what we as municipalities can do to assist with getting everything in order for them to come into our communities and film. So that'll be a start. That's on December 4th, and maybe through that meeting I can see if there's, I don't think we're talking about fees and charges, we're talking about what they need out of a film permit, but that likely will lead into future discussions around fees and charges. So. I'm
sure you could raise fees and charges. He'll be happy to talk about it. So. Okay, great, thank you.
I like that. I like that idea, Councillor Holmes. You know, the Okanagan Film Commission, through the REOS, we all pay into that. It has its own line items. So because it's a regional service, I think it might be good to follow a regional fees and charges schedule.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. These other ones are, well, next two are quick. I'll probably be coming back with things that we are not charging for, like equipment, and come back with a few of those considerations for council, for labor and for equipment rentals. Technically, we can't charge anything unless it's in the fees and charges schedule. So I want to make sure that we've captured everything and captured things that we could be charging for that we're not yet. One of the requests that we've had since I've been here is allowing free admissions for carded athletes. So right now we don't allow for that in our fees and charges schedule. Wanted to see if council had any thoughts about those athletes that are in our community or visiting our community. They do have arrangements with other municipalities to have free access, and if there was a level of comfort with that from council.
Yeah, I know. Go ahead, Councillor Carlson.
Oh, I've just, is it like one person a year? Is it, I mean, is it worth the effort? I don't know.
In Penticton, I probably had maybe 10 athletes that fell under that umbrella, and that they throughout a year would request access to our fitness room to work out or to the pool. Here in Summerland, I've probably had requests from 3 different athletes to see if they could get access. So not a huge demand.
I think it's a great idea.
I'd be in favor of it too.
Okay.
Me too.
Me 3.
Councillor
4.
Holmes?
Me 4.
That's 5 of us.
I'm good.
Okay, so that's good, the easy one.
Okay.
It's 5:01, Lori.
Okay.
Are we almost, we're almost finished this slide?
Yep. And then
Just the in tandem?
yeah, and this is just fees that we are now being charged. So if people are playing music in our parks or in our facilities, we get charged as a municipality to allow that to happen. And we just want to look to pass on that charge back to the user group. So if you get a free booking, but there's a direct cost to us, we would be charging that back to the user groups. And just wanted to see if there's any issue on that.
I have no issue with cost recovery.
Sounds good.
I agree. I think cost recovery is good. And that money goes back to the artists who actually sing and write the music. So I think that that's fair.
Yeah.
Do we want to pause or do you want me to just quickly go through these last 3 slides?
Councillor Carlson?
I have to go home, but
Okay.
you guys can carry on. I'm sure this will all come back and we can talk about it again. So
We still have a quorum, so thanks, Aaron.
I have to go as well, but I
Okay.
trust that you guys will make good decisions. We've all been on the same page so far. So,
We,
well,
okay, we still have a quorum, so
okay.
See you later.
what are you thinking, fellows?
Let's try to get it done,
Okay.
please.
Okay,
Okay, so I'll go quick. So we talked about the rodeo grounds. These are future fees, so things to look at in the future, not coming forward to council right away. Is the rodeo grounds fees, we talked about that. One thing that we don't have in Summerland is a Leisure for Everyone or a leisure access program. And that is not uncommon in most communities where if you are a person of low income and you are below the low income threshold, that you can get low cost or no cost access to facilities like public swimming or swim lessons or public skating. So that's one thing that's on my list that I would like to put together and do some more research of what's happening in other communities and bring that to council for your consideration. But that would be for a later time, unless otherwise directed by council. The other thing is that we don't have here is a group discount program. So if you are an organization and you have lots of people, maybe the local bank or maybe the teachers in town, the school district, we don't have a group discount program for our pool or fitness room. So something that I would like to build to try to get increased usership, but also a discounted rate if you come and buy a whole bunch of passes at once and you get that group discount. And another thing to consider for the future is access for electrical. So we do, do we in the future want to try to get cost recovery for those events that are a draw on our electrical? Again, not for coming back as part of this, but just something that I have flagged for consideration and do a little bit more research. And I know in Memorial, I think we're going to be able to meter that soon with the upgrades that they're doing in that area. So that will make that easier. So those are
to see that.
So if anything there's on this list that you want me to do for right now, please let me know. Otherwise, it'll be in a future year.
You realize this year is almost over, right, Lauren? I'm just kidding. Yeah, I'm fine with some time at a later date. Councillor Van Elfen?
I'm fine with that too, but just a quick question through to Lori, if I may. The program for low income, do you consider that to be a pretty onerous task to come up with some type of, a sooner than later? I just curious. Thank you.
It will take some time and research. So I'd like to find out, collect all the plans that are happening up and down the region and look at what best practices are and come back to council with some options. So definitely it would take additional time. It can be done if it's a priority, or it can come back and, later next year.
If I could follow up. No, thank you for bringing this forward, because I think it's really important that, people of lower income, their children have access to our facilities also, and aren't discriminated against because of costs and what have you, and the parents too for, I think it's just something good to look into, and I thank you for bringing it up.
Councillor Holmes?
Yes, thanks. So on that, so this is something more than, say, kids sport. It's for all people of all ages and for all access to recreational facilities, not just programs, that sort of thing.
Yeah, kids sport and Jumpstart, they're typically for sport, kids sport. So access to sport, where this would be access to recreation facilities. So it's not necessarily sport, it's like a public swimming or public skating or the fitness room. Some programs will throw in some swim lessons around there if you can't afford swim lessons, but it's typically to provide free or low cost admissions to recreation facilities.
Now, just to follow, I wonder if that's something we could partner with somebody to provide, the food bank, or I don't know who. I noticed in some of your in your stats there, I think it was in Osoyoos, there's no charge for public skating because a service group is in a partnership or something. So maybe this is something we could partner with somebody to or even a corporation, to subsidize.
Great.
Thanks.
Okay, and then just moving on, if that's okay, Mayor Boot, to propose timelines. So this is my suggested timeline, gathering all the information that I've heard today, going back and creating some recommendations and draft fee schedules, so what that could look like, and then wanted to see if council wanted me to go back to the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee first with these proposed fee schedules to get their input. That could be done in February, and then coming back to council in March, and then looking at the bylaw potentially being updated in April. So just looking for some feedback from council on those proposed timelines and whether or not to go to the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee.
Timeline looks good to me, and I would like to have you go to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. They've certainly done a lot of work with you especially in the last couple of years. So I'd like to get their input on that. Okay, it looks like we're in agreement simply by silence or thumbs up. So that's good. That's the last slide then? Nope, sorry.
This is the last slide, thank you. Looking at timing for fee increases. So if I come back in April, March and April for proposed fee increases, do we want to look at that to be implemented potentially in September, January of next year, or April of 2022? You don't necessarily have to answer that right now, but I just kind of throw that out there. As far as the timing of having a bylaw updated, we might not necessarily be charging the fees right when we pass the bylaw. We might want to be giving user groups some lead time. And also we have our rec guides that's already produced, so we need some lead time to get our fees and charges updated in our recreation guide. Wanted to see if council had any thoughts around that. Also just community awareness and consultation. It sounds like the consultation that you would like me to do is with the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee and also with the user groups, the youth user groups. I can go out and get some feedback from them, but just wanted to see if there was any other community engagement that you would like me to do around this process. And then my last point there, do we want to look out 5 years and say, okay, we're going to set the price, a phased approach for the first 2 years and then have a CPI increase of 1 or 2% going out into the future, or if we just want to focus on the next couple of years? Just your initial thoughts around those questions, please.
Anyone? Councillor Holmes.
Well, I think we should just focus on the next 2 or 3 years for now, because then, you know, we're going to have having a new rec center and everything like that to deal with. It might be a completely different, whole new ball game. I don't really. I think, you know, we put the fees in whenever we're able to. So it's September 1st. I don't think it makes much difference. And I don't know about for admissions and different times than rentals. I don't really understand why the thinking behind why we would do that. I don't see why we wouldn't just do it all at the same time.
The only reason for the rental groups is to give them enough notice. So if we are charging minor hockey a 5% increase, that we're giving them enough notice that they will have to consider that before they set their fees.
So most of those groups, their season starts 1st of September, I guess. Yeah. So a January or April date wouldn't really make much difference. They would have to set their fees for the beginning of September anyway. So I presume that's September 1st, 2021, not 2020. But you know, I think if the bylaws passed in April, then probably that's enough time. But that's something you can find out from them, I guess.
I'm wondering, Lori, if for the community awareness and consultation piece, it could be part of our open house, our budget open house in whenever it is March or whatever. That would still give us time, or give you time, give us time to make some decisions, and then pull together something for the open house. And then there would be kind of, you know, that however we message that, we can get it out at that time. Not necessarily, you know, it's not a property tax increase, but it is finance related, at least household finance related, and our household too. And then we can see, like Councillor Holmes said, we can determine whether September the 1st or January of 2022. I don't know if that's something that fits in well with our budget open house or not, but it's a thought anyways.
The budget open house is scheduled for the beginning of February. So I could create some slides or some information to say that we are looking at some increases to these areas, and at least we can get some initial feedback from people through that open house. We don't have to say what they are or, you know, what they're going to, but at least give some awareness about it and some initial feedback, general high level comments.
Okay, that'd be great. All right, so if there aren't any other questions 1, 2, 3, 4, yes. Could I have someone bring forward the motion? Thank you, Councillor Van Elfen. So there it is on your screen. Seconded by Councillor Holmes. And you've got all of your answers there. So call the question then. All in favor? And none opposed. So that carries unanimously.
Great. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Valuable feedback.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Laurie, for this long stretch, and Karen. Bring forward adjournment, please, somebody. Councillors Holmes and Van Elfen, all in favor? Okay, we're done. Go home and eat, everyone.